then so then I just go live. So how do I do that? The Tennessee Alabama game, yeah, that was pretty crazy. Oh, there it is. Okay. Whenever I do that, that covers that up. That is so insane. Okay. All right. Looks like we are live, Mr. Billy. And I am going to transition over here so we can see what we're looking at. Yeah. And then let's see, we got to go to this guy right here, and then transition over so everybody can see us. So how's it going?
It's
You
good. I heard we had something in common, by the way.
what's that?
There's only one good Girl Scout cookie.
Oh, is it the Thin Mint is your favorite Girl Scout cookie?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
What's the what's the point of the others?
I listen. I am not a hater. I get it. So to me, it's always going to be the Thin Mints, and you got to freeze them. You know.
I have another option for you. Put some peanut butter on them.
Oh no, sir. That's not going to be me. Won't be me. I'm one of those weirdos. Like everybody has their weird eating thing. I think you know.
Yeah.
And I peanut butter and chocolate together is just not
Oh, okay. I get that. I don't get it for me, but I certainly Carla won't touch it either. So
right.
yeah. But I put thin chocolate peanut butter in my Thin Mints and quite
So
enjoy them.
let's see. Is the Facebook chat working? Let's see if it's working here.
I've opened up the comment section, but I don't see anything. So
Hello,
oh wait.
folks. Oh no, there's Bubba. Right off the bat, I asked the question and we got the answer. Look at that. Did Bubba? Did it make it to the? Did I do the chat thing wrong? Is what I'm wondering though. Hold on. Let's see. I got to make sure that I'm doing this right, Billy. The social stream ninja, is it on? It is on. So what did I do wrong? Why did Bubba's chat not make it through? Why can I not do this? I hate that. uh okay.
Years of trying.
Yeah, you know. It's working on the Facebook, but it's like over here, but it's not working on this area, right? So maybe
Oh, I'm looking at I'm not live, so that's the
yeah.
problem.
I don't know, man. I messed it up again somehow, I think.
How do I get to live on Facebook there?
I'm not sure. You know, honestly, I'm terrible at this. I don't know why I decided this project would be a good project for me.
So you can learn something new.
Yeah, right. Um, so I have a question about daylight savings time and being a pastor. Is it the slowest day? Is it the slowest day of the year for you?
No, uh, actually, we had uh, our best attendance this year because of we've had some ridiculously cold weather and stuff like that. So it's not been, but we had 51 total people. Six of those were online through Zoom, and they're folks who can't get out anyway. It doesn't matter what the situation is; they're home.
Right.
Um, and so for 45 people were there, which is it's not great, but it's actually more than we've had most of the year. Traditionally, by the way, the lowest attended Sunday of the year is the Sunday following Easter.
Hmm. See if it's, see
People
if it's,
all show up on Easter, but they don't show up the next Sunday.
oh, there it is. Now Bubba's Texas. I don't know what is going on. It just showed up. It just showed up like 5 minutes late. I don't know.
That's
Yeah. Well, Bubba,
maybe
you're
I should
here.
maybe I should try YouTube.
Yeah. Let's
Would
try
it be better for
YouTube.
me to
See,
look?
yeah. I don't know. So we're if
Is,
anybody's curious, we're on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitch. And we're on Twitch, and we haven't even gamed yet. We're supposed to game on Twitch, but we haven't done that yet. So and I realized that I got to update this. We're going to be we're changing the video. We're not doing Christy Burke and Christian Nationalism today. We're pivoting. We'll come back to the Christian Nationalism. We're going to do a video by Dan McClellan, this guy right here.
I really
That
like Dan McClellan.
Yeah, so what do you know about Dan McClellan? I have his Wikipedia pulled up right here.
I know that he is, well, by faith, he's a Mormon. By education and career, he's a biblical scholar, and a lot of what he says online doesn't agree with the Mormon teachings, and
Yeah,
he'll tell you that one.
uh it's he really is holding on, although he plays the devil's advocate argument, I guess, on himself, maybe.
No, I've never heard. So he doesn't really talk about his faith or why he's a Mormon or anything like that on there, because he says that's not why I'm here. Why I'm here is to talk about um, here's what the Bible actually says, and he understands Greek and Hebrew way better than I ever could if I tried, um, and he knows the history of the Hebrew language and the history of the Greek language and the history of the Aramaic language, which is the language that was spoken in the time of Christ. Um, and so there's a lot of stuff on the web that people, whether it's YouTube or other social media sites, that they post this stuff and they've got, oh, well, we went into the Hebrew and look, these letters mean this and then this means that number and all that kind of stuff, and he kind of educates them on how that's true or not true.
Hmm.
Sometimes it's about archaeological stuff, and he studies that quite a bit.
The
Um,
Mormons are big
and
into artifacts, right?
um, I, I don't know a lot about the Mormon teachings. There are some artifacts that he has mentioned when people have specific questions about those. Most of the artifacts he's talking about, though, are really uh, stuff that's been found in Egypt or throughout the areas that were closer to the time of the
Hmm.
biblical time. Yeah. A lot of it's ancient manuscripts that have been found, or um, uh, what you and I in America might call a totem pole, or some sort of pole that has certain writings on it, and they think it proves this or that. And he debunks a lot of that.
Yeah.
Um, and as you'll see in the video, he also debunks some really idiotic theology.
Okay, so you've seen this entire video.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So full disclosure, I've seen the entire video as well. So we're going to be doing less like first
Reacting.
reaction. Well, I mean, we're reacting nonetheless. I mean,
Yeah.
uh, but we're just it's not a first time reaction. So we're just going to kind of like maybe make some additions to what we think about what he's saying here,
Yeah.
And really, also, unfortunately, we're talking about kind of I don't know, kind of a Southern local legend, I guess, in a way, in Dave Ramsey, and
Popular globe. He's popular nationally.
yeah, I mean, this is a very wealthy man at this point, but he's one. He sounds like a good old boy, right? When he's
Yeah,
talking,
I
you
guess
know,
that's true.
and I think he related to a certain kind of people, people's. I don't know. The more, if there was an austerity side that a person has, he taps into like, yeah, do it this way and you'll get it right. Now, I have opinions about maybe what he teaches sometimes, but like, for some people it works, and I don't. That's not my thing. I'm not really worried about that. In terms of like how he gets people, like the debt consultation type stuff, right? Like I think there's other ways to do it than his method, but I'm not here to judge him on that. I'm not, I don't want to do that. But he said some interesting things this week, right?
Yeah,
Um,
interesting is a really kind word.
yeah. Well, I'm trying to be nice, at least at first, Billy.
That's right. You're kind. You're, if not smart.
So I saw this. I guess it was a TikTok that made its rounds through. I don't really look at TikTok, but TikToks make their rounds, or stitches or whatever they are, and
Yeah.
it made its way on a couple of the different people I listen to, podcasts I listen to, and I thought it was interesting to go take a look. And Dan McClellan was one of those. So we're doing our thing, right? We're gonna watch him. We're gonna watch Dave Ramsey, and then McClellan's gonna talk about what he says about it, right? And then we're gonna make our little additions and talk about it with the chatters.
How is it considered
Yeah.
ethical for people to
I'm
own
still having
so
trouble
many
finding us
houses?
on YouTube because
Oh,
I
you know
keep
what?
getting
I
every other.
forgot. I have to share this to you on this thing. One quick second.
Oh yeah, it would be helpful to see the video.
Yeah, that's my bad, man. There we go. Do you see it now?
It's up and running. Yeah, I
Sweet.
see
All
the
right.
stitch incoming.
Yeah, Stitch incoming. Okay, here we go. Is owning multiple houses greedy?
I'm just wondering how, as a Christian, this isn't seen as greed. Don't you know that buying up all these homes is what's causing the housing shortage?
All right, let's see it.
Well, let's just start with not the spiritual part, but your economic understanding. That's not what's causing the housing shortage. Investors buying up houses is not causing the housing shortage. Okay, period. So you're just wrong.
So I don't have any informed opinion to offer regarding the economic causes of the housing shortage. So I'm going to skip over those parts of this video. I'm neither an economist nor an expert in real estate. However, if you would like an expert response, I would direct you to the account of Zachary Loft, who does know what he's talking about and does have a video up responding to Ramsey's claims, where he provides an awful lot of detail and background to show how profoundly Ramsey is misunderstanding and or misrepresenting the facts.
Now
that is it.
Hold on a second. Wait. Let's see what
Can we stay on that for just a second?
Yeah.
Because that is a thing going around, that these massive hedge funds or Blackstone, like all these, they're coming in and
they are,
buying up.
but they don't have a soul.
Okay. All right. So the hedge funds don't have a soul. You've never had to save the soul of a hedge fund, have you?
According to the Supreme Court, they do, but that's a whole nother story.
Well, I think that's whether they have voting, like they can contribute to a political. Right?
They said
They
said companies are people.
Companies are people. Now there was no ruling on a soul, if we're being.
That's true.
All right. So I went ahead and pulled up this guy right here, right? The guy that McClellan referenced, Mr.
I was going to ask you that if you had seen that or.
Yeah, I watched a second. I pulled up at this point right here to show that Ramsey's kind of full of it. This is not to say these companies aren't out there buying up houses. They are, and it is a part of the problem. But he's saying that it's like, little investors that are not the problem. And look, man, I owned a condo that I used to own. I rented it out at one point. Like I don't think owning some extra property is necessarily, I don't know.
Greedy.
Yeah, greedy would be one way to put it. In the case of when I rented it out, I rented out to a person who was in need, like that was moving into town, and somebody asked me, and I was like, yeah, we'll just throw it up for rent, right? And so I figured out how to be a landlord for a second, and it was, whatever. But like, I think when it comes to people that are looking to like make it part of their business, this is something that needs to be, like what I mean. I know a lot of house flippers, and I think house flippers owning 20 houses, as long as they're flipping them, putting them back in the market, and they're doing kind of like what their job is, I don't generally see that as a bad thing, right?
I think it might depend on what you claim is the housing crisis.
Mm-hmm.
If the houses are being able to be lived in by people, if you own 20 houses because you want one to live when you're there or there or there or there, a lot of really wealthy people have a lot of houses that they live in. They don't rent them out.
Mm-hmm.
They don't, whenever I go to New York, I have this place. And when I Florida, I have this place. And when I go to, there's a difference. They're taking those off the market entirely for rent or purchase.
Mm-hmm.
If you're saying the housing crisis is that people are unable to find houses to buy,
Right.
then you could argue what you were saying would be in fact interfered. So I don't know how they define the housing crisis in this.
In one way, I can see it being sort of like an interference, kind of like an interfering force with, like, like let's say you have a house flipping company, but I mean, ultimately those are like still houses that are going to be in the market, right? Now, I think that affordability,
hang on to 20 of them.
I think affordability is another question, right?
There's not houses available that are at a certain rate. Yeah.
Right. So I think when you do have a glut of houses, then if there's a lot of people that do this, then there is a problem, right? So you have these corporations that are buying houses, and then you have these small-time investors. Ramsey here is telling you that, well, yeah, the corporations, they could be a problem. They could be a reason why this is a problem, but it's really not, right? So then I went over to watch this guy, Loft, that McClellan was referencing here, and he was, he's got the numbers.
Just to be clear, he's saying that Blackstone and companies like them, in the blue, are causing the shortage, and not regular everyday investors, in the gray.
Right? So, okay, all right, so it looks to me that maybe it is the smaller 20 house owning Ramseys of the world, right? And I would be curious to how many of those are his personal houses.
Yeah, I think exactly. If he's renting them to people at an affordable rate, that's one thing. If he's just hoarding them, that's different.
Right. So I think even then, though, we get to a point, though, where it's like what he starts saying becomes pretty silly. Right, as we go down what
silly
he's saying. Yeah. But anyway, I just wanted to real quickly pull up, what this guy that he referenced was saying. It's like, no, Ramsey's kind of full of it on this, right?
That's right. Okay, so
hedge funds don't have a soul.
Yeah. So
and hedge funds also don't have agency. They only operate to the degree that actual human beings direct their activities. And so this strikes me as a profoundly ignorant and misguided attempt to outsource responsibility for unethical business practices, as if having an LLC means in the eyes of God, you also bear no responsibility for the unethical and immoral practices of your corporation. This is laughably misinformed.
I mean, and it's also just a massive deflection, right?
Oh, absolutely. That's a good. It's so this is pretty like it's an actual interview, and it's really just them answering questions. And so he's got somebody who's really there just to throw softballs at him and let him. Nobody's critiquing him or asking him follow-up questions here.
Well, the funny part about this is I think it's his show, and that's like his co-host.
Exactly, yeah.
But she kind of puts him up against the ropes. I love it. I don't know if she knew she was doing that, but she did. But yeah, he's deflecting. He's basically saying, well, it's too complicated for you simpletons to really understand.
Yeah, he is
and
known kind of.
I don't really have any responsibility in it.
Yeah, he's known to be a kind of arrogant.
You say arrogant?
Yeah, I did.
I didn't know. I couldn't tell if you said airhead. I was like, I don't know if he's an airhead, but arrogant, yeah.
No.
I don't know. I don't even know. 15, 20 houses.
There he is with the 50.
And a bunch of commercial real estate as well. How is that not greed? Because I don't own anything. I'm a Christian. And that means God owns it, and I'm managing it for him. So I guess you're calling God greedy now.
So while
Wow. Can we please have a pastor address? What's up, Rosina and Aaron?
So that is some really serious theological gymnastics. To be able to try to suggest that is, you were talking about deflecting earlier. This is
beyond deflecting. This is
just flat out, I don't have any responsibility for anything because it's really God's.
Right,
and that's just utter BS.
And but as he goes on as I'm a manager, right? And it's just so, oh man.
So from a perspective of a Christian, I'm a manager is what you say when you talk about our environment. We've been given responsibility for the environment. We have the responsibility to manage it, meaning how we use it. Right? And that's true for humanity, period. That we can rape the world for all of its resources and willy-nilly if we choose. But the responsible thing to do is to curve to use resources over renewably, all of that stuff that we talk about when we talk about ecology and
I didn't think this was going to go a climate direction, Billy, but hey, here we are.
But the more we damage it, the worse it gets, and the worse it hurts us.
And this
so he's claiming though.
Yeah, he's doing the same kind of thing as but for it's me. The thing I am is property and money.
I'm just a steward of the money that God gave me.
Right,
and I'm like, he's earned his money by, whatever means net
200 million.
Yeah,
from what I understand.
He's monetized a lot of things, and he sold books. He sold courses that you could buy for hundreds of dollars and then do the course. Yeah, I had a church that had done the Dave Ramsey, whatever the name of that course is, and I didn't have anything to do with it. They had done, some of the folks had done it before, and some people really benefited from the whole envelope thing. If you're not familiar with it, it's put actual money in envelopes set aside for things. It's a way of budgeting if you have a low budget. I'm sure Dave Ramsey isn't putting stuff in envelopes these days.
No, that would be a lot of envelopes.
It'd be a lot of envelopes.
He's done well.
And I know, and I had some folks that were, my age that had really benefited from that kind of, emphasis on budgeting, and that's important. But when he gives economic advice, claiming that somehow this is the way God would want it, that would be fine if he was actually considering. Every time I've ever heard him on his radio show or this kind of thing, just checking in. I don't see him very often. It's always he's always really money focused first,
Well, I mean, that's his
and
show.
then he
But
finds a reason to make it theological.
yeah. All right. Well,
He's horning.
let's see what else he has to say.
Many, if not most, of the rising generations face the prospect of never being able to own a home in their lifetime, not only because of housing shortages, but also because of increasing costs. Dave Ramsey wants you to know that he doesn't even have to be aware of how many homes he owns, but it's around 15 or 20, in addition to a lot more commercial.
I think this is also a big part of why this like clip is kind of like making the rounds too. It's just like I own 15 or 20. Like it's like, you know.
Like I've never owned a house.
You've always
because
lived in the preacher house.
the parsonage. The church has always provided a home for us.
Yeah.
There are many churches, including within the United Methodist Church, that provide a housing allowance, and you go buy a house, and they give you so much based on whatever they agree to, and you can apply that to your mortgage, and there's some, not tax incentives, but there's some tax breaks, I guess, for that. So if the church gives you housing allowance, that's maybe not as taxable as other money. I don't since I haven't done that aspect, but I can't imagine 15 or 20. I don't really even know that. Forget arrogant. He's gone beyond that. He's just out of touch.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, yeah. He's out of touch, and when you're out of touch, you just don't. You haven't like taken the temperature of the room, and it's just like there's a lot of like anti super wealthy guy sentiment going on right now, and for him just to be like real, flippant. 15, 20, somewhere around there,
Yeah, and let's be clear, I don't think he's a multi-billionaire or anything like that, but he's certainly got a lot of money, and to be able to make that claim is not in touch.
So yeah, Rosina, there is I mean, a lot of this probably is a little bit speculative on Dave Ramsey doing it as is he like flipping homes, and like, is he doing it like justly or whatever? You get to a certain point though, and it's just like, he's the $200 million man. He's got the big podcast. He's, I hope he's doing it the right way. But if he's just hoarding houses and like,
Yeah, he used the word homes. And
right.
I know real estate people use the word home because they don't want the word house, because they want you to be buying not just a house but a home that has a more warm feeling to it. But if I was saying I own 15 or 20 homes, it implies to me that these are places you live.
Right.
If I 15 or 20 houses for flipping, I would call them that. But that's me.
So like though, as an atheist, I just feel gross about it, right? Like for me, I'm just like, it's kind of gross to do how he does it, but I'm also like, no, I don't have any like skin in the game. But I used to have skin in the game, and this is why we're talking about it, right? And these gross feelings maybe have come from these, teachings that I had in my history, maybe with you even, Billy. So it's complete.
Yeah, we talked about the housing market a lot when you were a seventh grader.
Yeah, totally. That was what we're talking about. No, but I mean, I'm saying. Anyway.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Right. You caught me. You
Well,
caught me off guard there, Billy. How do you know? I can't remember that far back. I'm just kidding. I know we talked about a lot of baseball.
I think that there's also this to consider, is that Christians use the word morality as if we have some sort of claim on it.
Mm-hmm.
I think everybody has some level of morality and whatever that guiding force is in their life, whether it's God or just a basic principle of human beings, we have to live together. How do we do that?
Right.
You know, I have had this guy in one of my Bible studies recently that, you know, just basically said if anybody is not Christian, they hate all Christians, just blankly. And I'm like, well, that's just idiotic.
Right.
Of course, I didn't say that word then, but
Well, you were
I
practicing
think,
the sweet version of Billy.
yeah, that's right. Um, let's try not to tick everybody in the room off.
Mm.
Um, but also, I think I, I think you live by some sort of ethic, at least, whether you want to call it morality or not. I'll live by some sort of ethic, and I think where we come together, especially on that, is an ethic of being kind to one another,
Mm-hmm.
choosing to think about other people as valuable in the world.
Right. Um, I don't. I feel like I don't want to like just blanket condemn Ramsey for just the 15 to 20 house owning thing because it's part of his business and things like that. But
No, but it's fun.
well, it is fun. But at the same time, like when there's a clear need and you're clearly making so much money off of, I don't know. It's kind of like we get into this whole holy crap, Dara. That is a big old. Dara just wrote a big old. Dara just wrote a book for us in chat. We'll get to that in a minute, Dara. But what I was trying to say is like, I think there's a point when there is excess, right? Even when it's part of your business, and if you're not doing it right, the thing that I found gross about it was just kind of like the misquoting of the Bible type stuff. And this is something that's always so odd to me because again, I'm an atheist. I don't really have skin in the game, but this kind of stuff always bothers me. All right, what did Dara say? Holy moly, this is a lot. Question from mom. I thought this was a good read and wanted to see why or why not this is a good idea. The post she's referencing: if you're married and keep your separate finances, you're not a team. Oh, I saw this post too. Yeah, I agree with Dave Ramsey as a turd.
I do too.
uh,
Ditto.
you know, Jess and I, we have certain finances here and there. I mean, we keep a lot of things separate, but it's not like she can have everything of mine as she wants it. I'm not gonna. We have team goals financially, I think, but it's not like, let's just finish with Dave Ramsey. We could probably just finish with Dave Ramsey as a turd. But
That's right. Well, Dara, Carla and I, my wife, it all goes in the same pot, wherever it comes from. That's how we do it.
I think
I'm not
everybody can
telling
do it their
anybody
own
else.
way. I don't think there has to be one
Yeah.
right way,
A really good friend of mine does it very similar to what Dara was claiming she's doing, which is, you put in a percentage of your income and balance it that way. And she pays for certain things that are important to her, and he pays for certain things that are important to him. And it's weird when I hear her asking to loan her some money sometimes, but that always feels weird to me. But.
All right, we're a little sidetracked. Let's get back. We're 2:20. This is what we always do. We're 30 minutes in, and we've only gotten 2 minutes and 20 seconds of video.
Real estate, but the reality is that he doesn't own any of it because as a Christian, God owns it all. And there are a few problems with this. But I want to start not with Christianity in the New Testament, but the Hebrew Bible and the 8th century prophets who developed a rhetorical package known as the prophetic critique, which I've talked about many times on this channel. But it arises in the 8th century because of increasing wealth in the northern kingdom of Israel and the southern kingdom of Judah in the 8th century, partially due to the unusually long reigns of kings in the north and the south. But there was a lot of economic development, there was a lot of growth, there were a lot of new cities founded, there was a lot of trade going on, particularly with things like olive oil and wine and things like that. But what this did was transitioned the subsistence economies of the farms in these areas to a command economy, where wealthy people in urban centers were controlling what was being grown, increasing risk to the farmers, and also exploiting the debts that they might fall into. And what this did was create a lot of economic inequality, where the wealthy were hoarding more of the wealth and the non-wealthy were in control of less and less wealth and had greater and greater risks. And this resulted in a lot of debt slavery and a lot of land consolidation. So the wealthy were buying up the land that used to be owned by the farmers. And this economic...
So this is a good parallel to today, basically.
Yeah, we certainly see more and more of the current policies that are being put in place are putting the small farmers in jeopardy. That means who's going to buy those farms? What's the big company own millions of acres, and they're going to it's going to benefit the big wealthy companies at the detriment of the small family farms.
Right.
But I was thinking as he was talking about that, my wife and I went to Charlotte some years ago, and we went to a museum of civil rights museum, and they talked about
corporations. Yeah, Dara. Sorry.
Well, the company farms that they would hire they basically buy the farm from the family, or they would hire the family, one way or the other, and then when they got into debt, so the family would end up giving their farm away, and then they basically were living in slavery because they could never get out of the debt, because they could never make enough money doing the work. And then if somebody got hurt or injured or whatever, then, and I can't remember what they called that kind of tenant farming kind of thing.
Right. Yeah.
This is what was going on that he's talking about in the 8th century. And I think he means the 8th century B, by the way.
Yeah.
Economic inequality results in suffering on the part of the poor and the marginalized and the oppressed. And this gives rise to the prophetic critique, which condemns the participation of the wealthy and the elite in the public performance of religious duties, while behind everyone's back they're taking advantage of the economy to enrich themselves. They're manipulating the justice system in order to ensure that their interests take priority. They are, as Isaiah says, grinding the faces of the poor. And then they're turning around and offering sacrifices and trying to put their piety on public display. And prophets like Isaiah and Amos and Micah and Hosea and others excoriate the wealthy for doing this, because according to these prophets, the purpose of the law is to generate a just and a righteous and a merciful and an equal society.
I don't do
And so
halvesies.
when they engage in the public performances of religious piety, while directly undermining the purpose of those public performances, they're engaged in sin. And this is where we get ideas like, I will have mercy and not sacrifice. I do not delight in the blood of bulls. And I hate your Sabbaths and your festivals. But I want to point to one passage in Isaiah 5, where Isaiah says, "Woe to those who join house to house, who add field to field, until there is room for no one, and you are left to live alone in the midst of the land. The Lord of hosts has sworn in my hearing, surely many houses shall be desolate, large and beautiful houses without inhabitant." And so land consolidation that is excused as you just being a steward over God's property is rather directly condemned as a part of the prophetic critique of the 8th century prophets. But we can also find a condemnation of Dave's excuse in the New Testament.
Do we want to have any commentary over the Old Testament before we move into the New Testament, as Dan is moving into?
Yeah, so I had one thing. He mentioned Micah, and there's a really good example of another kind of condemnation of what Dave Ramsey is saying there in Micah. In the 6th chapter of Micah, there's it presents like a little law, God who is against me, that kind of thing, and it's a little debate going on, and basically the prophet says that God says that I don't want all of your sacrifices, thousands of rams or rivers of oil or anything like that. Those mean nothing to me. And so then in the end, the litigant comes back and says, well, but what does the Lord require of me? And Micah 6:8 says, what does the Lord require of me but to do justice, love kindness, and walk humbly with him? And that is very far removed from what Dave Ramsey is explaining. And I kind of live by those. Kind of live by that. That's good lessons for Christians. It certainly is, and for Jews as well that follow that text.
I mean, there's plenty of good lessons in the Bible for atheists.
Yes.
Right?
Well, yeah, and I think those words are good for all of us.
That doesn't mean you have to go the full mile. It's like, hey, the good stuff is the good stuff, right? Like we can just
and I think you can accept possibly the idea of seeking just for people, which means change the system, right? And that's what he's talking about there, is change the system from these that are hoarding to support those that are on the bottom. And this is seek justice and who love kindness.
Right. This is a biblical argument for a graduated tax system.
Yeah.
Starting in verse 9, then he said to them, you have a fine way of rejecting the commandment of God in order to keep your tradition. For Moses said, honor your father and your mother, and whoever speaks evil of father or mother must surely die. But you say that if anyone tells father or mother, whatever support you might have had from me is korban, that is, an offering to God, then you no longer permit doing anything for a father or mother,
I'm glad he
thus
answered.
nullifying the word of God through your tradition that you have handed on. And you do many things like this. So what on earth does this have to do with Dave Ramsey saying, I don't own any of these dozens of properties because God owns them? Well, this is about treatment of mother and father. And the idea that someone could say something is korban and therefore the mother and father cannot benefit from it is this practice. We don't know if it was an actual problem in the 1st century CE, but the author of the Gospel of Mark presents Jesus as condemning it as a real problem. But the idea would be, this wealth I have that might be used to support my mother and father, I'm going to say that's dedicated to God. So it's still in my possession. I still benefit from it. I still get to utilize it, but I don't have to use it to support my mother and father in contradiction to the commandment that I honor my mother and father, because this is now set apart for God, even though I unilaterally control it. Now, while Dave Ramsey's excuse has nothing to do with the commandment to honor our mother or father, the rationalization is exactly the same. It's not mine, it belongs to God. I just control it and benefit from it and can leverage it for loans and can use it to go on vacation and take a lot of time off and enjoy the privileges of immense wealth.
Right. Exercise the power $200 million gets you, and a very popular podcast. And I don't want to knock him too much. He's worked hard, but there's nobody. I'm of the opinion that nobody's worth $200 million.
They're certainly not worth $6 billion.
Well, Bill, yeah, right. But I mean, in the way of,
I know what you mean. I agree.
Like 200 million is, maybe we could talk about it because maybe out there's a market where a laborer can get, we're talking about a very extreme situations like actors and really, really highly paid athletes.
So I don't have, some people have a problem with athletes getting paid what they get paid. I don't have a problem with that.
They're laborers though. Right? Generally, exactly. If we're talking about their NBA or NFL salaries or whatever.
Guess who's bringing in the money? it's those laborers.
Right.
Guess who gets the money? It's the owners.
The owner still is getting a pretty nice chunk. That's just a more probably fair system, but it's just so much money. Everybody's, yeah.
Mark Cuban is not losing money on the Dallas Mavericks.
Does he still own the Mavericks?
Oh yeah. Or part owner. I don't know.
He probably has something,
level
right?
of ownership. Yeah, he's not giving that. He's that too much.
But ultimately, the money that we're seeing for like Dave Ramsey and any super wealthy person who's made a lot of money off of investment. Listen, investment is great. It is a very important part of how we, get things going, right? And how we get things done in our society, right? But there's a certain point. There's a certain point when these investments, if you hit on a bunch of them, great. But you become like this power source that I think is immoral.
I agree with that. Yeah. And I was going to say, on the core thing where he's, it's an offering or an offering to God, depending on the translation and how he interpreted. But either way, that's kind of set that money apart, so I don't have to be responsible for it or whatever he said there. What Dan said, but it made me think about, well, does Dave Ramsey set that money aside for these 15 to 20 houses, or some of that other money? How much of that is he setting aside and saying, well, that's for my business, so I don't have to be taxed on it. I don't have to be taxed because it's religious purposes. Is he using that as a crutch to avoid taxes as well? And I wonder about some of that.
Yeah.
Because people like him and the Joel Osteens of the world actually do people like me a disservice as a pastor, because I have what's called a housing allowance resolution, which means that a portion of my salary is set aside as housing allowance, even though it's not a money thing. It's an actual document that just says you can use.
It's just
up
a part
to
of your
amount.
compensation package. Yeah.
Yeah, but so then what happens is I have to, if I pay electric bills and all the things it costs to live in a house, anything that I don't spend up to that, say it's $10,000, anything I don't spend up to that amount gets added back. And that's just for tax purposes. When it comes to Social Security purposes, it gets added back on no matter. So, but the current administration is talking about taking that away.
What do you do with your fleet of aircraft?
I just them in different hangars so they don't get tangled together.
Bubba mentioned Kenneth Copeland's fleet of aircraft. I thought that was hilarious. If you've ever seen him talk about that, and then also
Cleflo Dollar.
Yeah,
Cleflo Dollar.
Every time I think of Kenneth Copeland now, I think of that COVID-19 like mix that was like redone with like heavy metal, and it's like COVID-19. It's like I might have to pull it up on YouTube and just so we can all like witness the glory of that rendition of when he was like, "Pwah!" Remember when he was blowing it away or whatever? Pwah! All right.
By the way, I don't get a tax exempt or anything like that. I do.
He does
pay
that
a
crazy
lot of
ass.
taxes here in Virginia.
What's that? What'd you say, Billy? I'm sorry.
I said I don't have tax exempt cars. I do pay a crazy amount of taxes on cars in Virginia. The expense of owning a car in Virginia a lot more than it is in Tennessee.
Interesting.
I pay $15 for my personalized license plate or something like that, but I have to get an inspection. Just I don't mind that. It's not that expensive. But then you have to pay taxes on the value of the vehicle every year. So we paid, nearly $1,000, maybe over $1,000 for articles this year.
Here's a question for you. This might be a hard one because you started talking about taxes. Should there be stipulations in which churches should be taxed?
So there already are. So I had a church that owned some property that was not being used as church property. It was wood. It was wood. Yeah, we had a little trail through there, but they paid property taxes on it.
Okay.
So in general, I would say,
What about income?
just like, what do you mean by that? Should they be taxed for donations?
Well, yeah, I mean, like when we get to the Joel Osteen type level, right? At what
Yeah.
point is it not just a profitable business?
So let me say this. I think first off, most churches are less than 50 in average attendance. So you make a good distinction between the mega church and the small local churches. My sister absolutely thinks all churches should be taxed based on their income. I do think that there's two parts to that I disagree with. One is churches are nonprofit organizations. So,
But can people can hide under that though? I feel like.
I think that is possible, and I think that there are people that try to call themselves a church who really don't. They don't. Stephen Colbert did something on his previous show where they actually established a church and took donations, and it was really pointing out the flaws in that system. So there are absolutely flaws, certainly ways that people abuse it. Just like there are nonprofit organizations that are not church related that also abuse those situations. So I do think those should be, tracked down, figured out, whatever that means. But to blanketly say all churches should not would really do harm to most of the small churches that in communities often serve a really good purpose of feeding hungry people and being a place of safety and refuge for people in many cases. A lot of the places that were being used during Hurricane Helene for distributing supplies and giving people shelter were churches that were in small communities. So to
You wouldn't want to those kind of folks. It'd be rough to tax those folks on donations.
Right. Exactly. And just taking away the housing allowance solution that I described earlier means they can't afford to pay their pastor that much more. So this allows them to be able to, because what I mean by that is if I'm in a church that, the United Methodist Church, I don't get a lot of say in where I go. We have an itinerant system. We're the only denomination that does this fully. There's some others that have a partial itinerant system. But for the most part, churches hire their pastors individually, and that pastor is going to come in and they're going to have to pay them. And if they can't say, okay, you'll be able to have a housing allowance resolution of so much money, or we'll give you a housing allowance of a certain amount, so much, then it means that if they take that tax benefit away from that, it's going to make it harder for those smaller churches to be able to afford to have a pastor in the first place.
And exist, yeah.
And exist. So the harm would be done more to the small churches in that. Secondly,
but is there a stipulation? I think if you have a fleet of planes, is that one of them?
I think there should be certainly, because every argument for being opposed to having, to support taxing on those folks is very valid when you say, well, like a fleet of, or even one plane for that matter.
How about if we don't put a monetary? I think that maybe for me, I would probably be a-okay with these stupid churches and their fleet of planes if they didn't have any kind of like influence on political stuff.
So here's the one where it really gets interesting, and to me, and I think it's not. This is really where the IRS and the Department of Justice or whoever does not step in and say, okay, if you're doing this, you cannot do that. Because to me, one of the reasons to argue for tax exempt status for nonprofit churches is separation of church and state. If I am, one of the things is if I go out and if I'm the pastor of my church and my church even endorses it, and I endorse candidate A, then the IRS has the right to say you no longer have tax exempt status.
Nobody does that though. Like who goes
And
after them?
so there is one instance that I know I can point to that you probably would be aware of, the Christian Coalition. Is that right? Back when I started out as a pastor, they were putting voter questionnaires. They would supposedly go and ask the candidates what they support. What
right. This was okay. I remember these folks. Yeah.
Yeah. So they were claiming that they were a Christian organization. They were a church group.
This would be the papers that would end up on my grandmother's kitchen table.
Yes, and they would end up on the doorsteps of churches on Saturday night, in large enough form for them to, for you to hand them out to all your congregation. And they were very biasly asked questions, and a lot of usually Democrats would just not even answer them because they were meant to, support a certain group of people. Let's get a certain people to say, see, they hate. They support abortion, or they support something, and it was whatever the hot topic was for them. And of course, the Christian Coalition was all about abortion. And so if they would ask questions that were very leading questions. Then, so the courts ruled that they were in fact endorsing, even though they didn't say so, they were in fact endorsing a certain party of candidates, and they were certainly endorsing certain candidates by the way they asked questions and the way they presented them. So they lost their tax exempt status. They're doing fine. They're still out there. The guy who's in charge of that, it looks like he's 12 and he's 60. Can't remember his name right. He's been on Bill Maher. He's been on. So
there is a process for it.
Yeah, there is, but as you said, who does that?
Yeah, I'm trying to. I wonder if the guy in Lebanon that we were talking about last week has got his exemption pulled.
Yeah, see, they don't go after these people, and they're saying if you don't vote for a Republican, then you're evil and
a demon.
Belong in my church. You're a demon. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. And that's a clear endorsement of Republicans in general.
Right.
And I had a church in La Follette, and the guy that preceded me, I had a member come in who was one of the two liberals in Campbell County, and she said to me, I had a real problem. He came back. He was a naval chaplain, I think his Navy chaplain, and he came back from his tour, 8 months or something. He was out, and he came back and he says, we really need to support Donald Trump. We need to pray for him, and we need to make sure that he gets reelected and all that stuff. And that was before the 2020 election. Mm-hmm. And she said, I just couldn't go to church for a while because I couldn't stand to listen to him doing that.
Yeah, I mean,
why was he allowed to do that? He should not have been allowed.
Let alone just the critique of Trump himself.
Right, exactly.
Right. Should you be doing that in the first place?
Right. And I had somebody I spoke about a lady that she's Hispanic, and she runs a restaurant in Etowah, and she is a citizen of the United States, but she came here undocumented as a child. What the process was for her to finally get even to the point of becoming a citizen. She employs people and all that, and she posted on Facebook not too long ago that it really is a challenge for right now. She's more afraid now than she was when she was an undocumented teenager because of the deportations and the way they're going about it. And being brown on a Wednesday is reason to pull her over. Ugh. And I shared that with my congregation, and I've had somebody leave the church because I was being political, and I said, no, I was talking about the scripture here where Jesus says talking about justice and lifting up the oppressed, and that kind of stuff, and being dues to people. And I never once mentioned any policy. I never mentioned any person politically. I was just pointing out something. Um, and I was told I was being political. Now, if I had come out and said things that met their political agenda,
Mm-hmm. Nothing would have been
they
said.
would not have said. No,
Yeah.
I would not have been political at all. That's just preaching the word,
Right.
and that people don't want to hear what's really in the Bible. That's why Dan McClellan gets a lot of kickback, because people, well, he's challenging their weird beliefs. So,
Right. And the stuff that they've like kind of instituted themselves also.
yeah,
From the stuff that I've watched of him, it's like, no, that's not in there. It's kind of like his general theme, right? Or
yeah, yeah. That's right.
no, that's kind of a stretch of the interpretation, or like this is kind of how he does it, right?
Right. Exactly.
Let's take a quick look at some comments here.
Yeah,
There
I
said,
stopped seeing
as an atheist, I don't want to see a smaller church that, or I don't want to see smaller churches that serve the community operate with being taxed. If you live in a house that costs over $1 million, you are not a servant. Now, see, I would probably $1 million might not go as far in California or something like that. So maybe in
right.
those.
Yeah.
But I get what you're saying. We'll just say lavish. $1 million at this point is not as much as it used to be, especially when we're talking about the housing market, as we're talking about. And then. Yeah, I mean, if you're looking to make a profit, if you're looking to have a lavish life, I think, I don't know if there's any kind of like quantifiable metric to say, hey, this pastor's got a tanning bed in his basement and, has a limo driver, or whatever, and we should tax him. But I definitely, 100%, you start with the political messages. I think that should be like instant. Right.
Right.
If if it causes a
so
fuss.
the rule in the IRS is if you endorse a candidate, that's considered reason to remove your tax status. And I was going to point out, look at all the churches that invite these that invite these candidates in to have a meeting and share their in their church
and then pray over them and put their hands on them all creepily.
Yeah, and the other part of that, the flip side of that ruling is that, so I invite candidate A, I also have to equally invite and fairly equally invite candidate B. Otherwise, I am showing bias and support for a particular candidate. So if you invited this candidate, you have to invite the other candidate too. They don't have to be invited at the same time. They can come and do their own thing. But that's not what you see happening.
No.
So that's a bothersome thing for me, is that when nobody's being, and that goes on both sides of the political divide there. You see liberal churches inviting Barack Obama and Joe Biden and other candidates. You see conservative churches inviting B-Man and those other candidates. John McCain and whoever, George W. Bush. So, yeah, it's a problem that I think there's a challenge. By the way, my favorite comment so far is Billy said the J word.
The J word? What was that?
I'm guessing it's Joel Osteen. I don't know.
Oh, Joel. Yes, Joel. Oh, yeah. I saw that up there. Okay. Let's see. Rosina. Yeah, we've been examining a lot of cognitive dissonance lately, I think.
That's the buzzword today,
Cognitive dissonance.
Yeah, some of it is really beyond dissonance.
Trump was put here to save people, but in the same breath, she tells me she's so scared of her family members being deported. Yeah, I mean, I just don't know what to tell people like that. Like, why did you think Trump was put here to be supported? I want to know more about that. Nobody ever asked these folks, like, what do you mean?
Oh, he didn't really mean that when he said.
Yeah. So anyway, all right. Let's move on with Mr. Dan McClellan here.
But technically it's God's, not mine. That's the exact same rationalization. And while Dave is not making the commandment to honor father and mother of no effect, there are other commandments about treating your neighbor as yourself and trying to generate a just and a merciful and a righteous and equal society. So by appealing to this laughable excuse that, oh, I don't own anything, it's actually God that owns all of this, Dave is just trying to, again, outsource responsibility for unethical.
When I heard him say outsource responsibility, I was like, wow, that is the nicest way to say that.
He's
outsourcing responsibility here.
Did you see the statement that was made when the rocket blew this week? It was Elon Musk's group, SpaceX rocket.
I didn't. I must have missed this story. I don't know how.
It was called a rapid, unplanned disassembly.
A rapid, unplanned disassembly. Okay, yeah. All right.
Business.
It blew up.
Practice.
Explosion.
Okay, so devil's advocate, what would you say if Greg was like, well, Dave, why do you need so many houses? Why don't you just give all that extra money away?
I'm managing money for God.
We got an ad.
So again, we're using this laughable excuse of I may control it all, it may go to my children when I die, and I may benefit exclusively from it, and no, you can't have it, but it actually just belongs to God. I can see one passage that Ramsey could actually appeal to defend this, and that would be the parable of the talents in Matthew 25, where Jesus talks about a man who leaves the country, and so he delivers a number of talents to his enslaved folks, and when he comes back, he expects the talents back with interest. And then the last enslaved person says, I know you're a harsh person, so I buried the talent and I didn't invest it. And so here's your talent back, but there's no interest. And then the master will take the talent from that enslaved person and give it to the others who invested and had an increase in their talents, and will say to him that has will be given more, and from him that does not have will be taken what he does have. One could interpret that as saying, oh, I'm a wise steward over these talents that I have been given by God, and my job is to increase them. And you could interpret that passage that way if you entirely ignored what the parable is actually about. Because the parable is about righteous deeds and the fruits of a Christian life, which again goes back to producing a more just and righteous and merciful and equal society. And what this does is this divests the parable of the actual parabolic function of the story, and it just focuses on the notion that this excuses and authorizes and validates the pursuit of wealth. And I want to share some comments from the Hermenea commentary on Matthew volume 3, which covers this passage. In the red box, it starts, individualized and secularized in this way, the parable of the talents could be applied to anything. The world of business becomes parabolic. But for what? In the evolution of language, one can see this development nicely in the two standard expressions, to profit from his pounds, that is, to make the most of one's opportunities, or to bury his talent. Those who make use of their gifts, possibilities, and sources of power, and who succeed with them, make the most of their pounds, while those who remain inconspicuous and do nothing with their abilities bury their talent. What one does or does not do in the process is of no consequence. In this way, the parable of the talents is also used by sharks and business people as spiritual legitimation, just as Bertolt Brecht claimed. The exegesis and the history of interpretation here have demonstrated where the roots of such a misuse of the parable lie. The parable itself invites misunderstanding. When Jesus, his whole message and his God, becomes the parable's signature and the definition of its contents, such misuse cannot happen. Where this was not the case, the parable was misused. The parable of the talents is theologically true only when it speaks of the God of Jesus Christ, who loves people in such a way that they are indebted to him for everything that they are and that they can achieve. It is theologically true only when it speaks of his commission to love and of the gifts that are used for that purpose, and not for just any human activities. It is theologically true only when it is related to the community of love that Jesus wanted. When it does not speak of these things, it is merely an empty shell of words with which every human activity can be legitimized. And legitimizing avarice is precisely what Dave Ramsey is trying to do here. And in addition to the prophetic critique from the Hebrew Bible, and in addition to Jesus's condemnation of folks who would say, I can't help you because my property, my resources, my wealth actually belong to God, you also have repeated condemnations of wealth and attempting to assert one's righteousness while they hoard wealth. For instance, in Mark 10, as he was setting out on a journey, a man ran up and knelt before him and asked him, Good.
So I want to go back to the parable of talents a second.
Yeah, this is a parable that bothers me a lot, but his explanation actually made me feel a little bit better about it in the first place.
So I have a document that I've kept for years, and this person said maybe if we turn the parable of talents on its edge or on its top, turn it upside down, sort of, that this parable was really kind of a under condemnation of the wealthy. So if you think
Which
about
is not
the
what
stories,
Ramsey's probably taken it as.
no, not at all. But if you think about stories that people do when they're in a regime where they cannot speak openly, that if they speak openly about certain things, then what's going to happen is that they're going to get condemned by the authorities. They'll be thrown in jail, or whatever it is. So what do you do to pass along your messages? Well, you hide your messages in ways that seem open to everybody. You can just read this story and that's what you're going to see, and it must mean that. And so it makes the the power ones feel good about themselves, whatever. But in the meantime, it's the average folk hear it very differently. The laborers in the field hear it very differently. And they would hear this as, well, sure, that's what you would do. You would bury it in the ground because that's the safest thing to do, because the banks are opposed, though. You can't go out and invest because this man is cruel and all. And I wish I could give you more of that example of that story, but I have heard one interpretation of that story that really kind of turns it on its head, and it shows it as a true condemnation of hoarding of wealth, and the very idea that the powerful, you could on its surface, you could look at that parable and say, well, that means that this separation of wealth is really a good thing, that those who have more will be given more. So therefore, it's okay that Elon Musk's and everybody else keep making more and more money while other people are struggling and suffering. It's okay that they're destroying the economy so that those with investments can make more money, whereas those who don't have investments are actually going to pay more at the grocery store, where it impacts their lives daily.
So I in general, I just have a problem with the parable anyway. So you're a person with money, of means, and you have 3 servants, right? This is how it goes. Is it slaves or is it servants?
It's he used the word slave, so I'm going to go with his word because he's usually right.
So then he comes to these 3 folk and he says, here's some money. I want it back after a certain amount of time. And he didn't say like, go do something with it. He didn't provide any instruction if there were to be something to do with it. He just says, I want it back, keep it safe. So to me, the most clear direction was followed by the person who gave him back the exact amount of money just because he buried it, right? Like, this was the person who took no risks with the money, right? So from that standpoint, I always had like a problem with why this person was not being lauded, right? Like all the other ones were. I mean,
Right.
I get it. I get it. Like, okay, you got some money and you took some risks and it worked out for you. But what if you took some risks and you lost your ass? Now, who looks better now? So I just felt like this was always just a silly parable in the first place when people started like throwing it around for these kind of things.
Yeah, and he refers to him as a wicked and worthless slave.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
All right.
But I think the part of what the guy that he read the article from, a part of what he is saying is, and this is how I've always interpreted. One reason we use the word that the talents applies to us, is it was really a measure of wealth. I mean, a measurement that used for silver or whatever. That a talent was worth a ridiculous amount of money. A single talent was more than a laborer could make in a very long in their time,
Mm-hmm.
based on the daily wage
Oh.
kind of thing. And I think that the the challenge there is that writer was saying it's not about money. First off, it's about what you do with what
What you got?
talent, what gifts you have in your life. How do you? So, Luke, you're a musician. What good would it do
A
anybody
drunk
if
one.
you just played? Yeah, a drunk one. What good would it do to just play your music in your bedroom?
Right.
Who would benefit? So, would you become a better musician if you did that? No.
Mm.
You become a better musician
I could probably
because
practice a little more.
you could practice a little more, but you also are getting experience that you can get in the bedroom or the studio or whatever, wherever you practice.
Yeah.
When you're out at the, I mean, I can't imagine trying to do what you do in those restaurants, in the bars, where a few of the people are paying attention,
It
and
takes just a little bit of alcohol and probably you have to sort of like fake the confidence until it becomes real confidence, and then you just do it.
yeah, I was in there one time, and there was a guy playing the same. The time I came to see you when you were indoors at the
Mm-hmm.
one up on Emory Road, and he was up on that little stage there. In the meantime, they had a Tennessee football game on with it blaring, and then they had their radio on, and he was trying to play. And then, of course, there's all kinds of noise and people cheering the game and whatever else. And I just like, how would anybody concentrate on that?
Well,
So I admire that.
so you can admire it all you want, but I just want to let you know that there are times when the show's going slow, and I'm watching the game just like everybody else. I'm still singing, I'm still playing, my hands are doing their job, but I'm checking out what's going on third down.
Yeah. So I have a friend that just was on a Zoom meeting this afternoon we're a week, and he said he fell asleep during his service this Sunday.
Oh no! Wait,
He
a preacher fell asleep during his service?
The pastor, and then he said, "Well, it wasn't during the sermon." And I said, "Well, good, because you were talking in the middle of the sermon."
That
He
would have
said,
been
"But
that would
no,
have
it
been
was
scary
actually."
if he fell asleep right in the middle of
That's right. Yeah, that would be just weird. And then he said, "No, it was really during the pastoral prayer." And I'm thinking, well, that's not better. That's you're still the one talking. And then it turned out what he meant was really what you just described, which was it was in the time when he's asking the congregation who to lift up, and he kind of just floated away a little bit, and wasn't fully there, and wasn't really. He just kind of dazed, and it was because he hadn't had enough sleep. Is what he said.
I
So anyway,
mean,
it
it
happens to
happens to the
even.
best of
It
us.
does. That's right. Yeah.
All right.
Hear about Mark.
Yeah, let's hear about Mark here.
Teacher, what must I do to inherit eternal life? Jesus said to him, why do you call me good? No one is good but God alone. You know the commandments. You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not bear false witness. You shall not defraud. Honor your father and mother. He said to him, Teacher, I have kept all these since my youth. Jesus, looking at him, loved him and said, You lack one thing. Go, sell what you own, and give the money to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven. Then come, follow me. When he heard this, he was shocked and went away grieving, for he had many possessions. And then we could go to Matthew 6:24, part of the Sermon on the Mount. No one can serve two masters, for a slave will either hate the one and love the other, or be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and wealth.
This is a fun dichotomy. I mean,
I was looking up the footnote there. It's mammon. So yeah.
Is wealth a master? I guess it is to some. Is wealth a master to Dave Ramsey?
Sure feels like.
Yeah.
So someone who has too many houses to even be aware of is suggesting I'm serving God by serving wealth. And at least in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus says doesn't work that way.
When developing CryoGlow, our shark product developers worked with dermatologists,
I gotta get the premium,
scientists,
guys. I
and
apologize.
How are you not greedy? Because amounts don't create greed. Greed is a spirit. It is not.
So he's right here.
I think
he's right there too when he says greed is a spirit. But like, okay, greed is a spirit, but like, the evidence of your spirit is your 20 houses.
Yeah, and I would argue just to point out, if you don't like the word spirit there, it's your attitude.
Sure, it's your attitude. It's the way you live your life.
Yeah.
There is truth to this, that greed is a spirit or an inclination. It's an intense and selfish desire for more wealth, power, resources, things like that. But if you just leave it there, that just deflects the argument. It doesn't engage it, because someone whose entire identity is wrapped up in getting more wealth and resources and power certainly seems to be wearing the uniform of greed and coming up with asinine rhetorical deflections and excuses like, oh, I don't own any of it. God owns all of it. That's a pretty clear indicator that you're just trying to deflect because you can't really be self-critical. So this is just deflecting the argument. It's not engaging it.
By the way,
if you want to be.
So Dan McClellan, you see by this, if you've watched enough of him, this really got under his skin.
It did, yeah.
The God, that thing, that little bear, and some others like that.
The pose.
Yeah, it's not that he doesn't, like, he does use the word laughable a lot, because some of the stuff will say there's nothing else you can do but laugh. But there's something about this one that seemed to really get under his skin even more, and I'm grateful for him for attacking this one, because it's beyond laughable.
If you're out there watching us watch your video, we appreciated your vigor on this particular subject. Yeah.
Sometimes the truth just requires that.
Yeah.
Be a communist. Just be a communist. Don't try to blame Christianity.
First, okay, hold on. We got to rewind this a little bit.
Yeah.
This part, like, I was like, okay.
This is just deflection.
Does Dave Ramsey know what communism is? Does he know what socialism is? I don't think he does at this point after I heard this.
Deflecting the argument. It's not engaging it.
Yeah.
And, if you want to be a communist, just be a communist. Don't try to blame Christianity for it. Okay? If you want to be a socialist,
those are dog
whistles. Don't try to blame Christianity for it.
I agree. Yeah. But no, yeah. This is him throwing red meat to the audience that would listen to him regularly. Right.
It very much is. Those are dog whistles, because I don't know what they really mean. I'm just throwing those words out. And if you don't agree with me, not only are you not a good Christian, you're also a communist or socialist.
Yeah,
therefore,
right.
We should hate you.
But like, if we were like really to examine the main character of the Bible, or at least in the New Testament, A lot of us say he's a socialist. He'd be a socialist. He'd be, you know.
Well, he certainly believes in separation of church and state. Jesus, I mean, certainly the early church practiced what he would call communism. I would call it communalism. They live together. They set, whole things in common. And Dan gets to that too. So,
I think an awful lot of Christians would blame Christianity for socialism and communism, and not in a bad way. I mean, if you look at Acts 4, for instance, you go to verse 32. Now the whole group of those who believed were of one heart and soul, and no one claimed private ownership of any possessions, but everything they owned was held in common. With great power the apostles gave their testimony to the resurrection of the Lord Jesus, and great grace was upon them all. There was not a needy person among them, for as many as owned lands or houses sold them and brought the proceeds of what was sold. They laid it at the apostles' feet, and it was distributed to each as any had need. I mean, you can argue for a few different economic systems being endorsed or represented descriptively or prescriptively throughout the Bible, but socialism is quite explicitly endorsed, at least in Acts 4, which would agree with Jesus' statement to the rich young ruler that he needs to sell everything that he owns and give it to the poor. So again, I think an awful lot of Christians have a case to make that socialism and communism is what Christianity points to.
That's a
the rich young man didn't turn around and say, "But God, I own it. I'll just make for you."
Right. He didn't say, I'm applying for the managerial job.
That's right. That's
right.
Is what Christianity points to.
That's a form of heresy called Gnosticism that believes that the material is bad, and anyone that has the material, their soul is in jeopardy. The Gnostics taught that in the first century. They were heretics. So if you want to do a little theological rabbit hole, we can do that.
So, yeah, let's do the theological rabbit hole, Billy. Let's talk about the Gnostics. What do you think?
So
I've been doing the Bible study I'm doing right now is from First John, the letters of John. And a big part of the whole letters of John has to do with addressing the Gnostics in the church that John is writing to. And so it's really interesting to me to hear what Dan has to say about Gnosticism here, because again, I'm not sure Dave Ramsey understands what the Gnostics were teaching.
Yeah, that's why I just had to giggle. Rosina.
And by the way, I don't claim to be a scholar on the Gnostics. So. Go ahead with Rosina.
Rosina says a socialist for her is wanting everyone to have equality of life. See, I'm not. I think people get real confused about like socialism as a definition in relation to equality, right?
Yeah.
Equality and opportunities. Equality in the way that we as a society recognize those who don't have as good of a head start. And that can be in a lot of ways, right? But I don't know if I would say just pure equality. But I think the general idea would be at least in the U.S., socialism or social projects that we do, like Social Security, for instance, right? Or Medicare, Medicaid. I think that, and honestly, I feel like it should be raised, but I think that a society should be measured on how well we lift our most vulnerable.
Yeah, I wish you were the first person to say that, but you're
And
not.
I'm not, but if socialism means a system that best looks after our most vulnerable, I don't know. I have a hard time with the people that really they don't understand what it is. They don't understand that if they're mad at socialism, then they're already mad at the things that they probably partake in.
Yeah, Trump said recently he wants to privatize everything. Basically, he didn't say specifically everything, but all of these things he wants to privatize. And I'm like, well, think about this. If roads were privatized,
Yeah, I mean,
your little
roads is the
county
easy.
road,
Yeah,
your little county road is not going to get fixed anytime soon. Only the roads that the companies that can make money off of those roads being paved are the ones going to do that. What he really wants to do is give money to corporations to do stuff
mm-hmm.
and make people wealthier while laborers work. Socialism is both an economic system and a political system.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's a confusion between the two ideas. I think there's a reason for that too. I think there's legitimate of that. But the idea that the government is responsible for things the government needs to be responsible for, so that he said that the equality, the equity is available to all people, so that people who live in areas that the wealthy aren't going to see any benefit to are going to also get their roads paved. They're also going to have good utilities. They're also
We've
going to
already
have
seen.
I think
access to things.
I think our perfect example when we talk about like equity of opportunity is a public library.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, there's a state trying to pass laws to make librarians get arrested. So.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. All right. Dan, what have you got for us left here?
That Jesus and the apostles and the prophets were against hoarding wealth and avarice and the naked pursuit of power and resources. And certainly the Gnostics were as well, but their concern for the material was not limited to the material as a metaphor for wealth or resources.
This is important.
Their concern was cosmological and ontological. According to Middle and Neoplatonism, the material world was fundamentally corrupt and evil, meaning our bodies and the material world around us. They believed that we were all immaterial spirits that had to overcome the material world so we could escape the fleshly prisons of our bodies and return to commune with the pleroma. So Gnostics are not just talking about the material as material wealth, they're talking about the material world, meaning the material universe. So this wildly misunderstands Gnostics, because both Gnostics and the New Testament are against the accumulation of wealth and advocate for its sharing with those around you. So Ramsey here, I don't think, has a really good understanding of what's going on in the New Testament or with early Christianity.
So he either has not a good understanding or he has a conflicting opinion that he's doing a dance around, and he's wanting to like blame some folk.
I've seen the Gnostic thing being thrown out by a lot of people who really don't understand Gnostics. And again, I don't claim to be a great scholar on the Gnostics. So first off, one of the things I would say is that the Gnostics had this view that he was saying that if the world itself is the material world, and tell me that Madonna's not running through your head right now.
Material girl is, yeah.
Yeah. She also, no, she was the material girl, but saying about the material world.
I know. The song is in my head now, specifically the bass line. Anyway, so yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But one of the things that the Gnostics were saying, and it kind of helped, what he said helped remind me of this, and he might, if we're lucky enough and Dan is watching, he'll correct me, I hope. But the fact that they believed that the material world, the physical world, was evil, that it was, a danger to us. Meant that they also didn't believe that Jesus, that there was a spirit that adopted this body that could not exist in the same place as the material world. So somehow, this is where I would get corrected, I'm sure, is that the other thing is that Jesus wasn't born a person, that this person was adopted, and the spirit, God's spirit, was put into him. And then when he was put on the cross, the spirit left. So he didn't die. And you can see the problem if you're a Christian. That also means that there was no resurrection.
That's right, heretic.
Yeah. So, and
real quickly, Billy, before you go even further with that, Aaron wants to know what is a Gnostic, and from my very limited point of view, a Gnostic or understanding is there was a group of folk that had a different set of books, right, Billy? Am I correct in this?
Well, no, there are writings that might have had that we've gotten later, but they were around before the Bible was finished. Before the Bible was all of, so John, the letters of John, he's writing about the Gnostics. He doesn't use the term Gnostics, but he's writing about the Gnostics. They are a sect in the early church that had a different view of things that didn't match what the disciples were teaching, that had this view, that Dan talked about the material world being so evil to us. And so they had a different way of looking at who Jesus was and what that meant. One of the things that kind of is implied in the letter of John, for instance, is the idea that somehow their teachings were very appealing to people because in one way they made it easier.
Right.
So you didn't have to worry about everything.
There was a lot less magical demands, maybe. But so
yeah.
So here's the thing.
So,
the Council of Nicaea, right?
There is that, yes.
A lot of the Gnostic books were not considered or pulled out of consideration.
Right. So that they probably didn't even make it to the Council of Nicaea. There was a theologian that had already kind of put together a set of books that he felt were the ones that were the completed book, the Bible, and they kind of accepted that list, and he didn't consider any books that were the Essenes or some of the other groups.
Right.
By the way, Gnostics, spelled Gnostics, comes from the word gnosis, which means knowledge. And I think again, not a scholar on Gnostics, but they had this view that, you could know things,
right,
in a way that, just by studying whatever. So you can see why a lot of
Gnostic books are like Thomas, right?
I don't know if Thomas was specifically a Gnostic.
Oh man, you got me having to want to look this up. I do remember one thing in my brief run-in with looking through Gnostic stuff, that they didn't believe in contemporary or not contemporary. They had a more contemporary view maybe of heaven than that heaven is an actual place, and that heaven actually only exists in the hearts of man, if I remember correctly. But maybe I'm wrong on that.
So just a little quick bings, because that's what I do things. And this is
right,
probably it's right. This is probably a run as done by the co-pilot or whatever, I'm guessing. It's a religious movement that emerged in the 2nd century, and it lists some key beliefs. Salvation through secret knowledge. That's the Gnostic part. Adherents believe that salvation can be gained through special esoteric wisdom. divine spark within humans. Gnostics believe that humans contain a piece of God within themselves, fallen from immaterial world.
Right. The king. I think that's what I was saying. The kingdom of heaven is in within every man.
I think that fit that. Yeah, material world was created by an inferior being. Gnostics taught that the material world was created by a lesser divinity, uh, and there's a word I can't pronounce. That Christ was a liberator. Christ believed that Gnostics believed Christ came to liberate people from the evil material world through spiritual experiences called gnosis. And finally, the emphasis on esoteric conclusive consciousness. I don't know what I saw an L for some.
Come on now, Billy.
You're
a preacher.
The word Gnosticism comes from the word for knowledge, and it's referring to a transcendent understanding of the unity with God. So, I think I'm impressed that you knew as much as you, because I don't know that much.
I don't really know that much. I just, I've explored some things here and there in my journey.
Yeah.
It's
one of the things I admire about you.
So yeah. I don't know. It just feels to me like Ramsey here is just like, he would call, of course, Dave Ramsey would call this kind of message heresy. Of course. Right?
Yeah.
Sounds to me like he's just throwing the spaghetti of rhetorical deflections against the wall
or
to
this.
see what sticks here. And none of this
demonstrates
any real critical thought or any competent grasp of the history of Christianity or of the history of the interpretation of the New Testament. This just strikes me as, one, him taking very personally a question that wasn't really directed at him specifically, and two, just trying to make excuses for his very clear and very unapologetic avarice. And the fit for this video has been Venom Lethal Protector.
If you haven't noticed, Dave Ramsey is a Marvel fan.
Dave Ramsey or McClellan?
Dan McClellan. Sorry, I don't know why I said that.
Well, McClellan has finished. And I was looking up Gnostic books. The Gospel of Thomas is one of them.
Okay, I plead ignorance there.
The Gospel of Thomas, a collection of Jesus' sayings that was written after the New Testament. It's considered a key document in understanding Gnosticism.
Yeah, and it is. So one of the things I do know about Thomas, yes, it was never chosen as one of the books, et cetera, but also. It's really in what you just read is it's a sayings document. It's not really like our gospel writings, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and even John, are stories tell the story of Jesus from their perspective. This is just a sayings book, a quote book, basically.
A quote book.
There's no narrative to it per se.
I mean, I think the narrative's already come and gone. if you're, this is an addendum,
that's right.
so to speak.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's all to me. It's all like, okay, they were just this Bronze Age man trying to figure out stuff.
Yeah, but there's also things like there's the Gospel of Judas, for instance, and people have tried to interpret that one and try to say, oh, these are lost books, and they weren't lost. People knew about them. They just weren't chosen to be a part of the canon.
Right.
But
I mean, I think it'd be fun to talk about the Council of Nicaea sometime. Am I saying it right? Nicaea?
Yeah, Nicaea, yeah. I think that's odd. Yeah. There's a number of councils, but that's the one that,
Well, that's the one that said, this is what it is, right? And
then, I think that's correct.
And then you had, after that moment, you had organization beyond belief. After that specific moment. Because then you could get behind a specific thing instead of just like, right?
Yeah.
Like this is the government codified version. So to speak.
I mean,
maybe not government, but
also they dealt with some theological ideals, some theological concepts. I'm trying to think if that's the concept of Trinity, for instance, is something that, it's not actually a biblical concept. There's nothing in the Bible that says there was a Trinity, and that means there are three in one: God, the Son, Father,
I mean, that
and
doesn't
Spirit.
make any sense anyway. But
And they were all equal, but they're all one, and they're all
and
separate, but
they
they're all
also don't know
equal.
about each other.
And I've never heard that. They seem to be.
Well, hold on. You may have not heard about this, but we can logic this one out. All right.
How is that?
Well, I mean, if we were just to take the crucifixion, for instance, like, why would, okay, in the Bible, Jesus speaks to God, right?
Yeah,
Like
that would be true.
So why, if you're not, if you don't, like, if you know exactly why would that even have to take place? It's just for the story, right? But if we logic it out, Jesus shouldn't even have to say a thing. It's because it's him.
Well, you know your wife, right?
I know my wife.
Do you speak to her?
I speak to my wife.
Okay, you said
I am not my wife. I am not my wife.
That's true, but you are one.
No, Billy, this is not the same. We are not the.
You mean you didn't blow
we're
out
not,
the envelopes?
Oh my God! All right. So it is 11:41, and I think again we've run out of game time. So, well, this has been fun. Is anybody still here? If you're still in here in chat, give us a little thumbs up or whatever. If you're hanging out still, I don't know.
Yeah, I've kind of lost the chat part. I was on Facebook finally, and I was still having issues.
Yeah, I've got to figure out a way to get it was basically all Facebook chat today, so but
well, I had to
Aaron, when you say who decides what biblically is canon, when we talk about the Council of Nicaea, that was literally the council that did it.
Right.
And they decided to pick what was the stuff that needed to be in and what was not. And there's a lot of folk out there that believe that the Council of Nicaea purposely picked more magic type stories because that was the stuff that was like really catching on with the masses. That's what I understand.
I think one of the better arguments about one of their flaws is that they chose books that enforce their I'm going to use a term that Dan McLaughlin uses, their political identity politics. That reinforce their power.
Yeah. I mean, there were men with motivations, and they had
we're not using the word men as a general for humankind here. We're meaning men.
Specific men with specific ideas on how to gain power.
And how to get power from women.
And yes, and the Bible is a good place to start to do that for a lot of those folks if they want to like really focus on that stuff. So that was the thing. All right, well, folks, thank y'all. Who makes up the third leg of the Cochrane Trinity?
It's the dog.
Yeah, well, we have two dogs, so I guess it's not
that's true.
So it would be
that's true.
I don't know, a quadrity. I don't know, what would it be, an itty with a 4 in it? Yes, Aaron, that's the thing about it, is it's all subjective. I mean, like, people will tell you. I think that okay. How about this? Let me. It's not subjective in the fact that at this point I would say that at least I don't know. Most of us use the King James version of the Bible, wouldn't we say at this point, Billy? Or what do you use?
I use the New Revised Standard Version. It's probably the most. They had better access to more ancient resources. They did it with a larger group of people, so to try to eliminate as much bias as they possibly could, but that's completely impossible to do entirely. The King James is not the best translation out there by any stretch of the imagination.
Translation is one thing. But I'm just saying, like, we've kind of, I don't know. Translation is one thing. I'm saying, like, the construction of the Bible, it's not like there's some folks throwing in some Gnostic books. I mean, I guess there may be, but I mean, there's one that's kind of like,
no,
this is the Bible. The chapters are the same.
The Catholic Church uses what we call the Apocrypha, which are books that were written between what we call the Old Testament and Testament.
Oh, do they?
And they recognize those, the apocryphal writings. And you can find in the apocryphal writings, for instance, Maccabees and some others, that the story of the story of Hanukkah, for instance, does not exist in our Bible.
Sure.
In the Old Testament, it exists in that apocryphal time.
In the Catholic book,
which is used in the Roman Catholic Church uses that.
That's
now they do give that still yet, if I'm correct. They do give the Apocrypha kind of a notch down mark. There's the Old Testament and the New Testament, but then there's also the Apocryphal books, which were a little bit less. But they're still holy books, and they're still sacred, and they're still scripture, according to them. The Protestant Church kind of doesn't recognize those in that way at all. Protestant, any church that's not of the Catholic ilk, whether it's Protestant or what we call Anglican churches, which does come from King James in a way, because we don't really recognize the Apocrypha books. I do have a few Bibles that have the Apocrypha in them.
You have any opinions on whether that should be included or not?
Because it isn't really something that I needed to learn a lot about, because we didn't really use it. I would plead partial ignorance on. I'm familiar with it somewhat, but I haven't spent a lot of time studying it. I think that every bit of scripture has every bit of writings in that way might have some value to us.
Right.
But I also think that people want to interpret all kinds of stuff in weird ways. So why give them more ammunition?
Let's keep it to what we can keep it down to. Like, okay.
Keep it simple. Yeah, that's right.
Simple.
The KISS
quote
method.
Unquote. Famous last words. Keep it simple when talking about the Bible. Yeah. And Aaron, I don't honestly, man, I don't find it that weird that you're asking that question. We can talk about it some other time. That's my cousin. So, all right.
And what was the question again?
He asked. He was the one who asked who decides what biblically is canon, and then that's kind of we went down the Nicaea discussion a little bit, and then Bubba asked who makes up the third leg of the Cochrane Trinity, so we can get that canon correct. Make sure that we have that. But then Aaron asked if it was all subjective. And the answer to that is yes and no. Yes, I would argue that every religious experience or not experience is going to be had in your own brain. It's your epistemic predicament. And you have to kind of like make a decision on what you find to be valid. Whereas if we're talking about like specifically why the Bible is put together in the way it was put together, I would say no, that isn't subjective anymore, but maybe back then it was. Right? Like it's pretty codified. It's pretty codified now, except for what Billy just said about.
It's not like the
Apocrypha.
It's not like the canon of Star Trek. Does the animated series count, or does
Yeah.
It's not like that, where there's still
Yeah.
debate about that. Books
Yeah.
do count, and which books don't count.
There's no debate amongst the traditionalists. I would make an argument that now that I've heard about the Catholics having a little mini book in between, but then also there are the folks that like to do some adding. We did talk about the Gnostics, but then also the Mormons, which we just got done watching a video of a Mormon, and they have definitely went the Joseph Smith route and told some interesting stories themselves. And added a lot to the Christian religion in their own compartmentalized way.
By the way, the according to Dan McClellan, which I thought this was interesting, the Mormon Church, the Latter-day Saints Church, does not use the Joseph Smith translation of the Bible. There's another sect that uses it, and they kind of had copyright on it or something. And
what?
So,
wait, whoa, rewind. Like
they
kind
had
of
some
copyright or like copyright?
They had some sort of ownership thing, and they claimed I'm using copyright as a kind of a metaphor of that they had control of that text, and so the Mormon Church wasn't really allowed to use it for 100 years or so.
Mm-hmm.
And Dan McClellan said that as of somewhere 60s, late 60s, early 70s, I can't remember when exactly, the Mormon Church uses the King James Version as their official Bible, which I thought was interesting that they don't. But I have had a copy of the Book of Mormon.
Have you read it?
I've never read it.
Never read it?
I kept saying going to, but I never got around to it. Some of their beliefs are really weird.
Well, I mean, hold on now, Billy.
They're
any more weird than anything else?
Well, they're otherworldly.
Well, hold on.
There's the Church of Jesus Christ Latter-day Saints. What do you think that means?
I would say the saints that came after.
So no, it's
the original
saints.
saints.
If you were a good Mormon and you were faithful in the end, you would someday be the saint of a planet yourself.
The saint of a planet.
Like you would be the god of some planet.
That's fun.
Now, again, I'm not a scholar of Mormonism, but that's my understanding of that.
I dated a Mormon.
You've heard about the underwear. Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
they exist in Oak Ridge.
Yeah, the underwear is always a fun. If you want to get under a Mormon's skin.
Yeah, that's right.
You go under their underwear. Yeah. You go after their underwear if you want to get under their skin. Yeah. Well, this was a fun one. I guess next week.
Let me quick address if the question about subjective was not specifically about what books are canon. If it is about that, I agree with you 100% that it's the church, which would be today the Roman Church, established that.
Yeah.
And then over the years, yeah. But if you're talking about some of the other stuff, I think absolutely a lot of things are subjective, even how we relate to, as Christians, how we relate to the scripture, how we connect. There's a word called hermeneutic that I always interpret to mean basically that place where you connect to the story. And if you and I sat and listened to the same story that wasn't religious or anything like that, just the same story, we might laugh at different places. We might be touched by different parts of the story because of our background and our history. Something that the person said or just the way they said it might trigger in us a reaction different than it would be for the next person or me, you.
I would almost say that this is played out in furtherance in denominations. You know,
yeah, like, I can't argue with that.
You know, this group of people said, well, this part's more important to us. And then other people said, this part's more important to us.
Yeah.
And I believe it like this, and and then so you get these subjective things that are now very organized.
Yeah, that's right. And for one of the things related to that is it's more important to me because I connect to it more. I have this bond with that story, or this part of the story connects to me in a way that it doesn't somebody else. But then, as you said, the organization then comes, and then they teach that as dogma. And then as they teach that as dogma, then it becomes, well, that's what the Bible must say. And that I've been fighting a lot recently, and that's what you see.
And this is what Dan McClellan's fighting. Yeah, he's saying
it is that your dogma isn't actually biblical.
Right.
Your dogma is not even based on the Bible; it's based on church history or your church history, and so it makes it even more subjective.
Indeed. All right, well, guys, this has been fun, and I guess next week we'll try to get back on Christian nationalism. And talk a little bit about that. We did have a quick mention. I want to see if we can give a parting shot for you here. We talked about pandering, basically, to your audience and whatnot. We were talking about old Dave Ramsey. But it brought me back to a moment in the summer of 2020 when Donald Trump cleared out Lafayette Square and then held up that Bible. And I just wanted to hear, what was your reaction in that moment?
Complete and utter disappointment in humanity. Because people believed that was a good thing. It was beyond pandering. It was insulting. Because he went to hold the Bible up in a church sign that specifically was defending those people that were out there.
Right. The pandering was effective to a certain group.
Yeah, and that's what disappointed me the most is they can't even see through the fact there's which is the upside down Bible, and the way he held it up, it's a prop, and he used the Bible as nothing more than a political prop to. It was disgusting. That's what it was.
All right. Well, on that note, let's take the anger in our heart about that to bed.
Enjoy some Thin Mints.
Listen, it's done. That's why I said when I put up the post of what have I done? I knew they would be gone. They're gone.
I didn't even get any this year, so
Well, there's still opportunity for you, Billy. All right, man. Thanks again.
We don't have as many Girl Scouts. So.
Guys, come hang out with us again if you're still around. We're gonna keep doing this on Mondays and just talking about stuff. So this has been fun. Billy, thank you again.
Thank you.
See you guys.